Hi, everybody. It is November 5, 2019. This is part two to the video that I posted 2 days ago now on world chaos, the Council on Foreign Relations moving us ever so closer to the United Nations being that one world government. The New World Order is here. We are already living it. They're simply cementing and tying up the loose ends. The chaos that is breaking out in the world, I'm going to show you glimpses of it. It's only glimpses of protests erupting all over the world simultaneously. And I'm not going to get into the reasons, the particulars of what is happening in all of these countries, but essentially, these protests are showing you that people are fed up, people have been pushed to the limit, people are suffering, and they're out on the streets protesting anti-government, protesting government corruption, austerity measures that are really squeezing the people in those countries. They're protesting tyranny. They want their freedom and they want to live decent lives, and they can't do it. Why is it that governments around the world can't seem to get it together to at least enact measures where the people can live a decent, relatively comfortable life? And why is this all happening at the same time? Because it's designed, it's orchestrated to bring about global crises. Crises meaning violent protests, wars all over the place, climate change, and the global economic slowdown, which is causing an awful lot of problems in a lot of countries. People can't find jobs, can't support their families. Okay. All of this is, as far as I'm concerned, deliberate. Now, I'm not saying the protests that you are about to see have not erupted organically. I do think that these protests have been infiltrated, many of them in the nations that you will see have been infiltrated to bring about the violence. But governments are not doing anything to answer the demands of the protesters, the people that they're supposed to be representing. And they're going to let this go on and on. Conditions are going to become worse for people around the world. Protests are going to get more and more violent. And what's going to happen? The United Nations will step in as the one world government to bring about peace, to end poverty, to implement their sustainable goals. When you have the Pope of the Catholic Church coming out and saying kind of outrageous, making these outrageous statements, signing on to the United Nations Agenda 2030. Well, there's so many, but let me not lose focus. When he comes out and says, man must obey the United Nations, please, if anything should beg questions in your mind, it really should be that. Don't you think? You need to obey the United Nations. Why? Well, the Vatican is very much behind the takeover of the world. The United Nations gets their orders from the Vatican. You must obey the United Nations. Now, I'm going to read a little bit of this. In 1945, the arch enemies of Christianity founded the United Nations with the objective of destroying Christianity and submerging the world's peoples under the tyranny of communistic one world government. The United Nations today is that central world force that is generating the present day revolt against the faith, with special emphasis on children's rights, feminist rights, abortion rights, LGBT rights, and all the Masonic rights that were created to separate man from God. The United Nations asserts that these rights are to be respected everywhere by all peoples. During a September 10 press conference en route to Rome from Madagascar, the Pope insisted that when the United Nations speaks, man must listen. When we acknowledge international organizations and we recognize their capacity to give judgment on a global scale, for example, the International Tribunal in The Hague or the United Nations, if we consider ourselves humanity, when they make statements, our duty is to obey. We must obey international institutions. That is why the United Nations was created. Really? On April 29, 2015, the Vatican officially endorsed the United Nations goals, the Sustainable Development Goals, which included contraception, abortion, euthanasia. Moreover, the Pope in May 2019 was calling for a supranational, legally constituted body to enforce these United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Okay. Francis has advocated that we look to this global elite for our instruction, as expressed in encyclicals, not just one, but several. There is urgent need of a true world political authority. Wasn't the authority of the King of Kings good enough? The United Nations is the infamous broad brood of vipers that is perverting the nations and bringing them to a collision course. So why is Francis commending the flock of Christ to them? It is no secret that the United Nations was founded in 1945 by the CFR, members of the Illuminati, a satanic secret society that works conjointly with the Freemasons. Many secret societies are involved. Yes, the Zionists are involved, but, well, I don't hear or see an awful lot of comments about the Jesuits. And those who do leave the comments about the Jesuits, the Vatican, the Pope being a Jesuit, how many Jesuits have infiltrated our government, just like the Zionists have infiltrated our government? No, it's not just the Zionists. And it sure as hell is not the Jews. God. Man, that is so disturbing to see. Anyway, don't want to lose focus. Okay. We are heading there fast. And it's not going to come about this year. I do believe 2020 is going to be a very revealing year, but it will probably be revealing for us, not those who have decided to deny reality and choose ignorance. They will continue to choose ignorance. And when that shit hits the fan, they will bow down to their authority figure and obey, whether they're Catholic or not. They'll obey. Obeying the United Nations. I thought Catholics were supposed to be obeying Jesus Christ, the Word of God. Okay, well, this is also a very good article. It is United Nations Globalism to replace Americanism. You know, the whole notion that the United Nations was scheming to become a global government-style institution with centralized coercive powers was once dismissed as a conspiracy theory for kooks. Today, it is obvious to anyone willing to pay attention to the news. Obey the United Nations. Okay, so just want to read a couple of paragraphs. It's very, very important to understand, you know, what is going on. United Nations Human Rights Council, dominated by dictatorships. Really? All right, so United Nations seeking to become global government. The globalist goal is to turn the United Nations into a global government that would actively deny individual rights, one that could not be effectively resisted by its victims. It already has courts, armies, self-styled law enforcement, and crime-fighting divisions, and much more. Former United Nations Secretary General Ban Ki-moon repeatedly referred to the United Nations as the Parliament of humanity. A parliament, by definition, is a law-making body of a government. Before that, Ban referred to the United Nations Agenda 2030 Sustainable Development Goals, essentially a roadmap to global technocratic government, as the planetary declaration of interdependence. The head of the United Nations General Assembly, when the scheme was adopted, Peter Thompson, referred to it as a master plan for humanity, the objective from the start of the United Nations. Alger Hiss led the conference to create the United Nations. He was a U.S. diplomat and Soviet agent. Among those involved in the process who have admitted the goal of the United Nations becoming the world government, was John Foster Dulles, a leading deep state globalist who also helped create the United Nations and went on to become U.S. Secretary of State. The United Nations represents not a final stage in the development of world order, but only a primitive stage. He wrote in his book War or Peace, therefore, its primary task is to create the conditions which will make possible a more highly developed organization, which is what they have accomplished over the years. Dulles said, I have never seen any proposal made for collective security with teeth in it, or for world government, or for world federation, which could not be carried out either by the United Nations or under the United Nations Charter. Okay, so we're getting closer and closer by the minute. Now, when you see videos created by the Pentagon to use for training purposes of our special forces, to use in a course at Joint Special Operations University, they talking about this unavoidable future, a very dark dystopian world. And then when you look at all the protests taking place, well, the protests actually look a little bit like what the Pentagon filmed for this course. This is coming, and it's coming soon. And let me interrupt now to tell you I'm going to interrupt very shortly after I start to make right a lie.
The future is urban. By 2030, urban areas are expected to grow by 1.4 billion, with that growth occurring almost entirely in the developing world. Cities will account for 60% of the world's population and 70% of the world's GDP. The urban environment will be the locus where drivers of instability will converge. It is the domain that by the year 2030, 60% of urban dwellers will be under the age of 18.
Okay, so they talk about population, overpopulate, too many people. But it's also because they're driving people into cities. Oh, who's they, Carol? The useful idiots who are impoverishing areas. Well, let's just take the United States. Okay, economic policy is all about reshaping the United States into mega regions. So I've done this before. I have videos on my channel and my primary channel, Never Lose Truth. Developing those mega regions, which I believe we have 10 or 11 here in our country. You impoverish areas where you don't want people living. You impoverish them by gutting manufacturing. Why do we outsource so many jobs? We outsource those jobs to other countries because the United States had to be brought down. And other countries had to be brought up. So, manufacturing of the automobile. It was deliberate to make American automobiles crap so that everybody would buy those Toyotas, the Hondas, which were made far more reliable than the American automobile manufacturing companies. Why is that? Americans were always able to make a good automobile. Suddenly, well, you wanted to stay clear of Ford and Chrysler, GM. That was all deliberate. It was deliberate to impoverish certain areas of our country. It was deliberate to bring Japan up and make their economy strong for a time being. And I'm just using one sector of the economy here in the United States. Okay, so if your area, suddenly you can't find work, manufacturing has stopped, and what are you going to do? You go to the mega regions. That's where the work is. Texas Triangle, Piedmont Atlantic, or Atlantic Piedmont, which is where I am. So there's a lot of jobs here in South Carolina. They're manufacturing. We've got a lot of corporations, though there's a lot of business closing now. So you have somebody impoverished in Maine who has lost his job. He's got to feed his family. Where can he get work? South Carolina. They're moving, shuffling people around into mega regions. So in part, it's not about people being born, but it's also about driving huge numbers into cities because it's the only place that they can find jobs. All right. But what about that overpopulation thing that we have going? I've posted so many videos. I still get comments from people who are claiming, oh my God, the population, it's growing out of control. In 2 minutes, we're going to have 9 billion people on the planet. And, well, they cause climate change. Scientists call for population control. On Drudge today. Wow. Okay. Yeah. Here we go. So, we need less people in the world. And there's an awful lot of scientists calling for this. Are you kidding? Earth needs fewer people to beat the climate crisis. Scientists from 50 nations converge on Geneva to discuss what was then called the CO2 climate problem. That was 40 years ago. Oh, now, 4 decades later, more than 11,000 experts from around the world are calling for a critical addition to the main strategy of dumping fossil fuels for renewable energy, there needs to be far fewer humans on the planet. Wow. Unbelievable. Here we have Bloomberg posting this, but I'm going to show you what Bloomberg has recently posted as well, which is opposite of what this article is claiming. Scientists make specific calls for policymakers to quickly implement systemic change to energy, food, economic policies, but they go one step further. Yeah, you need to enact population control measures. It must be stabilized, ideally gradually reduced, within a framework that ensures social integrity. How do you get social integrity? How do you get integrity out of a lie? 2003, explanations of the fertility crisis in modern society, a search for commonalities. Commonalities. This was 2003. And they're wondering, what's going on? There's a fertility crisis, near global fertility decline. That began after the baby boomers in the 1960s, and from the 1980s, an increasing number of European countries and some Asian ones achieved very low fertility with little likelihood of completed cohort fertility reaching replacement level. In other words, populations in countries were going down in 2003. Well, do some research, and you will find every single year historic lows. Fertility crisis, world fertility crisis. The United Nations published a study, world fertility crisis. But the United Nations also uses the propaganda of overpopulation. Too many people in the world that are creating climate change. All right, that was 2003. Has it gotten better? No. Japan Today. These are articles within the last month. October 13. Okay, the decline in births is happening faster than official projections had envisioned. Wow. All right. Low birth rates in the United States and worldwide are becoming a new normal. October 25. Study finds fertility below replacement rate. It's the new normal. Yeah, many articles on that. Majority of South Koreans are pessimistic. Why? Because of the low birth rate. United States, women having a lot less babies. Historically low birth rate. And that comes from the CDC. Historic low birth rate. Fertility crisis here in the United States and all over the world except for several African nations. Poland, fertility crisis, low birth rate. And the replacement, that replacement level, okay, we'll get to that in a minute. Depopulation or population decline in Central Eastern Europe. All recent articles. Armenia. Okay, country after country after country. In fact, you can take a look at this map right here, fertility rate all over the world, and this is World Population Review. Total fertility rate 2019. Well, less than 3 babies being born to the women in these countries. Canada, 1.5. United States, 1.8. Russia, 1.7. China, 1.6. Well, they had that one-child policy going, but I believe they have been in real crisis with their population, and if they haven't already, they are considering getting rid of their one-child policy because they need replacement slaves. They need the consumers to buy the goods. They need the slaves to produce the goods, and they're falling, declining. So, as you can see, Austria 1.8. Australia and Brazil 1.7. Even Mexico 2 2 children. Catholic nations, Catholics, have a lot of babies. Oh, right. Well, since this Pope has come in, you can use birth control, and you can get an abortion, and it's not a sin, and okay. So, Bloomberg, here, I couldn't bring up that Bloomberg article because, I had to be a subscriber for that special article. Bloomberg warns of global fertility crisis. What? Bloomberg warns of fertility crisis, but Bloomberg, you're also saying that scientists, 11,000, are now calling for population control. Okay, well, that's the way we roll. For humanity to reproduce steadily, every woman must have at least 2 children. In the 1960s, the figure was 5 children per woman. By 2017, it had fallen to 2.43. So, enough of this. Population, yes, we've had a fertility crisis for a very, very long time. And it's not just that women are saying no to children or to smaller families. We've got an awful lot of poisons in our food, in the air that we breathe, in the water that we drink, that cause fertility problems. We also have Wi-Fi that is known to cause fertility problems in boys and girls. So, don't leave me a comment about how the population is growing out of control. In case you have forgotten what the video was that we were watching, the Pentagon's video, training video, on what the world is going to become this is our unavoidable future.
The cities that grow the fastest will be the most challenged as resources become constrained and illicit networks fill the gap left by overextended and undercapitalized governments. The risk of natural disasters compounded by geography, climate changes, unregulated growth, and substandard infrastructure intersect to frustrate humanitarian relief. Growth will magnify the increasing separation between rich and poor. Religious and ethnic tensions will be a defining element in the social landscape. Stagnation will coexist with unprecedented development as impoverishment, slums, and shantytowns rapidly expand alongside modern high-rises, technological advances, and ever-increasing levels of prosperity. This is the world of our future. It is one we are not prepared to effectively operate within, and it is unavoidable. Megacities are complex systems where people and structures are compressed together in ways that defy both our understanding of city planning and military doctrine. It is an ecosystem that demands a highly agile and adaptive force to successfully operate within. Infrastructures will vary radically, with concentrations of high-tech transportation, globally connected air and seaports, contemporary water, utilities, and waste disposal intermixed with open landfills, overburdened sewers, polluted water, and makeshift power grids. Living habitats will extend from the high-rise to the ground-level cottage to subterranean labyrinths, each defined by its own social code and rule of law. Social structures will be equally challenged, if not dysfunctional, as historic ways of life clash with modern living, ethnic and racial differences are forced to live together, and criminal networks offer opportunity for the growing mass of unemployed. This becomes the nervous system of non-nation-state, unaligned individuals and organizations that live and work in the shadows of national rule. Where physical domains can be seen, digital domains will have limitless potential to breed and expand without limit. Digital security and trade will be increasingly threatened by sophisticated illicit economies and decentralized syndicates of crime to give adversaries global reach at an unprecedented level. This will add to the complexities of human targeting, as a proportionally smaller number of adversaries intermingle with a larger and increasing number of citizens. The scale and density of these domains is daunting. In a city of 10 million, where you hold the support of 99% of the population, the remaining 1% represents a threat of 100,000. It is an environment of convergence, hidden amongst the enormous scale and complexity of the megacity. These are the future breeding grounds, incubators, and launching pads for adversaries and hybrid threats. Linked globally, these are man-made labyrinths that provide refuge and movement across the vast sections of these cities where alternate forms of governance have taken control. The advice of doctrine, from Sun Tzu to current field manuals, has provided two fundamental options. Avoid the cities, or establish a cordon to either wait out the adversary or drain the swamp of non-combatants and engage the remaining adversaries in high-intensity conflict within. Even our counterinsurgency doctrine, honed in the cities of Iraq and the mountains of Afghanistan, is inadequate to address the sheer scale of population in the future urban reality. From the streets of Aachen to the citadel and Way, we have defeated adversaries who attempted to use urban terrain to their advantage. Urban conflict is written deep into the Army's histories. But in tomorrow's conflict, these megacities are orders of magnitude greater in complexity, and our current options do not meet strategic ends. Our future operations must allow us to, as historic ways of life clash with modern living, ethnic and racial differences are forced to live together, and criminal networks offer opportunity for the growing mass of unemployed. This becomes the nervous system of non-nation state, unaligned individuals and organizations that live and work in the shadows of national rule. Where physical domains can be seen, digital domains will have limitless potential.
Okay, that's a repeat. The video is not the complete video, so it's unfortunate, but the complete video is still in the hands of the Pentagon. Now, what they're talking about is, and also in 2014, the Army had published a report on how the Army is not prepared for what is to come, this unavoidable future. Now, we've seen the Army and other branches of our military conduct military exercises all over our country in mega cities. Are they preparing for this unavoidable future? Perhaps, but I think that once we're at this point, certainly shit hits the fan with the economy is going to bring a whole lot to us in terms of violence. When people are hungry, they will do anything. And when you have a people, the majority of whom have never done any work on their moral core, they have a weak moral core, they have a strong immoral tendency to do things for their own best interest in a self-centered manner, a whole lot of Americans will do anything to get that food, especially if they have children and they need to feed those kids of theirs. So, one option, just let them kill themselves and the military stands down. That's why it's important for all of you to be armed and prepared for this unavoidable future. But as you were watching this, and also, look, our U.S. military all over the world, and we have managed to quell, these areas of the world going into their cities. Look, we should never have been in their cities. We are the number one force in the world creating all of this chaos. We, the UK, Israel, Saudi Arabia, we are. I mean, if we stopped bombing countries, if we got out of countries instead of occupying them, like Iraq and Afghanistan, and we're there forever, and we build United States military compounds in the countries that we have taken over, don't you think the world would be more peaceful? Of course it would. But to try to get people to, think that, we wouldn't have the migration problem. Refugees wouldn't be fleeing their countries if the United States military would stop destroying countries. And it certainly is very clear when you look at how many protests are going on in countries that we've destroyed, like Iraq. They have no jobs. But also, remember, the infrastructure in our country has been left to just rot. So when they're talking about sewers backing up, hey, that's happening already. But talk about the internal, underground organizations, for the economy. They're talking about gangs. They're talking about criminals, operating in these areas. And they become the enforcers of the law that whatever it is they want happening in the areas. It will be gangs. But don't you think it's interesting that for many years, throughout the Obama years and Trump years, we have seen the Department of Homeland Security, ICE, Customs and Border Patrol, release illegal immigrants onto the streets of America, bus them, fly them all over the country, many of whom are young men without proper vetting. I have posted videos on ICE, the Department of Homeland Security, releasing out of U.S. jails illegal immigrant convicted felons, convicted of violent crimes, murders, rapes, vehicular manslaughter, back onto the streets. They don't deport them. They walk out of jail, back onto the streets, all over the country. Why? What's good? Of course it's deliberate, because it's setting up, it's not just about, jihadi cells in the United States. We've got gangs all over the United States. And many have come right on through from Mexico to the United States, and they have set up all over the country their gang memberships, organizations. So when you see this unavoidable future, and, well, one of the pictures was of a MS-13 gang member. MS-13 has come right through the border, operates heavily in Long Island, New York, Maryland, California. I'm not sure about California. The Crips and Bloods. And I've posted on this, others have posted on it, our U.S. law enforcement hooking up with gangs, employing gang members as police. That I posted a video years ago, L.A., Los Angeles, employing gang members as police. No, it wasn't to reform a gang member. It was to hire psychopaths who could kill anyone and not have a single second thought about it. This is all over our country. So just for a moment, forget about those, cells of jihadis or Al-Qaeda, ISIS coming out. What about the gangs? So here, border shock, 50% surge in gang members, 650,000 illegal immigrants will be freed into U.S. in 2019. Another fabulous congressional hearing. The show put on for Americans to believe that they actually have a government. All right, so this was testimony given to the Senate. And this was April of 2019. Okay, so more than the population of Wyoming will be released into the United States, where most will never be heard from again. All right, you have all over our country now illegal immigrants. A whole lot of them are young men, and we don't know. We don't know whether or not they are gang members, criminals, convicted for crimes in their own countries. Why? Because we don't vet them. They come in, they claim, I want to apply for refugee status, or I'm running from the violence in my own country, whatever it is. They know the code words because they've already been trained in their own country. This is what you say to come across the border, and it's all deliberate. So aside from what truly amounts to probably, this is an approximate number, 150,000 of the videos that I've posted on Department of Homeland Security and ICE releases of criminal convicted felons who are illegal in our jail, they releasing them back onto the streets over the years, I'd say more than 150,000 who have committed violent crime. And then you talk about all of the gangs. So you come over the border, you're illegal, you state those words that give you the right to stay in the United States, you're given a court date. 90% don't show up. You're let free then after the court date. Go wherever you want. We'll bus you, we'll fly you here. Go. We don't know who they are. We don't have any information on them. They're given a court date, they don't show up. They're here then in your communities. And I have no doubt that many have been brought over and told to establish their gangs, kind of lay low, and when we give you the word, go out and create. You can be the police of your communities when the shit hits the fan. Okay, so yes, concerned about the growing risks to our nation's public safety, national security, rule of law due to illegal and uncontrolled immigration. The crisis extends well beyond a single border, from Central America through Mexico to our southern border, and throughout every major metropolitan city in the United States. U.S. isn't sure of the background of those coming to the country and often loses them. Wow. Say the magic words, credible fear, whatever it is. Well, the U.S. has been not properly identifying or vetting who's coming across the border. Purposeful to set up that dark dystopian future. FBI site, interesting number, isn't it? 33,000 violent street gangs, motorcycle gangs, prison gangs, criminally active in the United States. Many are sophisticated and well organized. All use violence to control neighborhoods and boost their illegal money-making activities: robbery, drug, gun trafficking, prostitution, human trafficking, fraud. Many gang members continue to commit crimes even after being sent to jail. Yes. And it's very organized. It's very deliberate. It's very orchestrated. The U.S. military and government is highly capable of keeping out of our country illegal immigrants who have not been vetted, A neighbor just interrupted me, so if I am, I apologize. I can't really remember what I had just said, but all of it's across the country, gangs operating. And you can take a look at this global incident map. They have many different categories on this website, but one of the categories is gangs, events, incidences, and other suspicious activity. Well, there's a lot of gang activity all over the country. You know, I looked at South Carolina. I live in Anderson, South Carolina. And let's see. What do they got? There's a lot of gangs up in upstate South Carolina. I believe this is Anderson? Yeah. Okay. Drive-by shooting in Anderson. And there are multiple drive-by shootings, and these are recent. Okay, so what you can also do, just to give you an idea, they have listed, and you know, you click on the details, you'll get, you know, more information about these gang-related incidences. So the first section is the most recent, and it is all over the country: Minnesota, New Jersey, Texas, Illinois, California, Nebraska, and Kansas, and all over. So this is the breakdown of the specific gangs. The 12th Street Gang, and the 12th Street Gang has an awful lot of activity. Just in October alone, 18th Street Gang, Asian Boys, Bakerfield, Bandidos, Biker Gang. All right. But what I want to show you, Crips and Bloods, very, very big in the United States, all over, Colorado, Washington, North Carolina, New York, Michigan, Virginia, Texas, South Carolina, New Jersey, Tennessee. They're all over operating. And you can check out an awful lot. But how about drive-by shootings? Now, we know that drive-by shootings, don't we? I do. Gangs. The drive-by shootings of gangs against rival gangs. Or how about those drive-by shootings when you're getting initiated into a gang and you gotta kill someone? You gotta do a drive-by shooting? Do you know how many drive-by shootings there are? Mainstream media is not reporting on this. A whole lot. So it starts with November 4, and it's in every state: Arizona, Alabama, California, Arkansas, Texas, Nebraska, you know, states that you wouldn't even think it would be in. New Mexico. All right. So this is just November, beginning yesterday. On 11/2, South Carolina, in Anderson, also in Chester, all over your state as well. Okay, so we had a lot of drive-by shootings for the few days of November. October? Oh, October. Wow. There is a lot. October 16, 15, 14. Okay. Woof. Wow. September. Well, how about, do we get to August at some point? Maybe. Let's see. August. Okay. This is all in the last couple of months. All right. Well, yeah, you get the picture? You're not hearing about all of this. You're not hearing about the extent of violence that's going on with the gangs. So, the military stands down, law enforcement stands down because things get too crazy. Who will be the law enforcement in your area, in your community? It may very well be a gang. It's kind of like how the cartel rules Mexico. Well, we're going in the same direction. Okay, so this is just for this year. We're in June. We're in May. Trying to go faster, faster. Let's go down. Come on. Oh my God, a lot of just drive-by shootings or related to a drive-by shooting. My God, April and March. Wow, they don't even stop for the winter. Woof. Come on. Oh, February. Okay. So, what's going on? There's a lot of gang activity happening that you do not hear about. All right, we finally got into 2018. Yeah, unavoidable? It's certainly avoidable, but it's being orchestrated to come in so that, well, that one world government will step in and take care of things. So
tens of thousands of anti-government protesters have rallied again in Pakistan's capital, demanding the resignation of Prime Minister Imran Khan. The so-called Freedom March, led by a conservative opposition party, arrived in Islamabad on Thursday. Kamal Haider is in Islamabad.
All right, so this is Pakistan protests. Opposition group says Khan has not fulfilled promise to improve economy. People can't find work, so the Pakistanis are wanting him gone. What is this? Haiti. And of course, Catholic leaders are going to be joining in. They take the direction from their Pope, who is a Jesuit. And yeah, the Jesuits, not every Jesuit, just like not every Christian, just like not every Jew, just like not every Gentile, is a part of creating this New World Order. Most are useful idiots in the creation, but there's a whole lot who are taking orders from up top. They are knowing exactly what they're doing, like Pope Francis knows exactly what he is doing. He is handing to the world a one world government along with that one world religion and a body, an economic body that will, that's already, it's, look, they have the structure already in place. They're propping up economies all over the world, but just by printing cash, throwing it into the economy. But this economy, global economy, is going to crash. So they want all of the conditions ripe at the same time to bring it all down. And things are coming to a head. So it may very well be 2020, 2021. It's going to be sooner than 2030, that's for sure. And yes, the Vatican, Catholic Church, secret societies, the Zionists, communists, they're all working towards this. Here, Chile. And these are the most recent videos. Most of them are the most recent. Iraq.
Protesters set fires, erected barricades, and even lay down in the road at intersections in central and eastern Baghdad as the work week began. The roadblocks created traffic jams across the capital, preventing people from getting to work. Some government offices and businesses were forced to close.
We have one demand, which is employees join sit-ins just like us. They can participate by staying at home. We want all the government ministries to stop operating. We can all unite. We are all one people here.
In Tahrir Square, which has become the epicenter of the protests, there were signs that people are settling in for the long haul. This burned-out skyscraper has been occupied since the second wave of anti-government protests began more than a week ago. From the upper floors, protesters can see the square and the bridge below, leading.
Okay, let's see. Ecuador. All right, so if you want to understand what is happening in Ecuador, you can read this article, The Gray Zone, and the editor, talk about the tyranny. Oh, it's not just around the world. It is right smack in your face where you live, the United States, the free country, the freest country in the world. Really? Max Blumenthal was arrested for a simple assault that apparently occurred 5 months prior to his arrest. Max Blumenthal, The Gray Zone, reports on the truth. Venezuela. Oh, it was political persecution. Yeah, and we've got that going on right here in the United States, and it is occurring with greater frequency. The drone revolution, Ecuadorians revolt against the repressive U.S.-backed President Moreno's neoliberal policies. Oh, we finally got a puppet back into Ecuador who has been, well, he's just the puppet of corporations, really. U.S. government is a corporation, but we're talking about transnational corporations. And I need to play a few minutes of this video. It's important to get that almost nothing in the world is happening organically. It's all driven by a corporate elitist, the highly, well, the kind of wealth that, you know, God is even surprised about, you know, the Vatican, the Queen, the Zionists, the communists, the elite. There are so many deliberate agendas taking place in everyone's country, but the United States sending in their economic hitmen to take over countries. You don't need to drop bombs to take over countries. So this is John Perkins talking about how he was working for United States corporations, Fortune 500 companies, World Bank, United Nations, the IMF, U.S. Treasury Department, John Perkins, former chief economist, who was an economic hitman for corporations. This is how they destroy countries and go in and steal their resources without dropping a bomb.
What is an economic hitman, and what did you see and do as an economic hitman, and who else is in that hierarchy?
Well, I think, first of all, an economic hitman, the main thing that I did, that economic hitmen do, is to identify countries with resources that corporations want, like oil, arrange a huge loan to that country from the World Bank or one of its sister organizations. That money then goes to our own corporations, not to the country, but to our own corporation to build power plants, industrial parks, infrastructure projects that make a lot of profit for those corporations, and help a few wealthy people in those countries, the ones who own the industries, the commercial centers. But the majority of the people suffer because the money is diverted from health, education, and other social services to try to pay off the interest on the loans, and in the end, they never pay off the principal.
So you, as an economic hitman, you go to a country and you say to the leader of the country, take this giant loan, build a big dam, build a power plant, whatever. You're going to be a hero. You're going to help develop your country. And what happens if they say no?
Well, you're going to make a lot of money.
Oh, and you personally, we're going to make you rich,
yeah,
too.
And all your friends and family.
Right.
Yeah. And if you don't, well, remember what happened to Salvador Allende in Chile, and remember what happened to Arbenz in Guatemala, and Mossadegh in Iran, and Lumumba in the Congo. These are all people who didn't play the game, and they were either assassinated or overthrown in coups. So it's pretty clear to a government leader, either take the money and get rich in the process, or get thrown out. And I know that if you get thrown out or assassinated, you're going to be replaced by someone who will play the game. So what's the choice?
When you were an economic hitman, did you talk to any world leaders who said no thank you and who were then later assassinated by
Two of my clients, Jaime Roldos, democratically elected president of Ecuador, and Omar Torrijos of Panama, who became a very good friend. Mm-hmm. And I had tremendous respect for these two men because they didn't play the game, and yet it also meant I wasn't doing my job, and I also was worried for them, and both of them were assassinated because they did not play the game.
So when the hitman can't talk them into it, the jackals come in and take them out.
Exactly. And if the jackals can't do it, as with Saddam Hussein and Gaddafi in Libya, then the military goes in.
So we get...
This has been going on for a lot longer than I have lived, and it still goes on. So the madness, the suffering created to people all over the world is not happening just, well, accidentally, or, my God, some government mismanagement of funds. No, it's happening deliberately. And, well, it's happening an awful lot in Central American countries. Argentina, thousands march against austerity. And the International Monetary Fund in Buenos Aires. Yeah. People are tired. People are getting fed up. This is in Lebanon. Not just happening in the Central American countries. It's happening all over. European countries, Middle Eastern countries. It's happening all over. So they got rid, the Lebanese got rid of their prime minister, but they're not stopping because they want government corruption gone. They want government replaced. And there's no subtitles on that, but here we have Lebanon again. Protests rage on as politicians stall. Since October 17, they're shutting down major artery streets. The army has been called out to remove protesters on the streets. And from the protests that I saw early on in October, well, they were reporting on how there was no pro-government, anti-government protesters fighting one another. Well, that's now happening. And I believe that these protests are infiltrated to get up, stir up the pro-government, stir up or get the anti-government protesters violent, and then nothing really comes of it. How the leaders of the country send in their pit bulls, you know, their military, their law enforcement to, you know, just put down the protests. And this is in Bolivia. Corruption taking place in their recent election. Hong Kong, they're still going 22 weeks later. Well, they're fighting for their freedom as well. Everybody's fighting for freedom. Everybody wants freedom. They just want to live, you know, a comfortable, decent life. And they're prevented from doing that because of what their government is doing, taking the instruction from the United Nations, from the Vatican, from the Zionists, because they are reshaping the world for a really dark, dystopian communism on steroids, where everybody will be and feel they are a slave. Nicaragua. Here, Colombia. Algiers.
After the December elections. Meanwhile, an important cleric, Sheikh Lakhdar Sawi, issued a fatwa calling on people to participate in the December election to prevent the country from descending into anarchy.
Well,
have to leave, and after that, we will do the elections. The elections must be from the people and to the people. For freedom, and no elections, no elections, no elections.
people want freedom. Egypt.
Thousands of people are protesting across Egypt, calling on President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi to resign. Several people have been arrested at protests in the capital, Cairo. Al Jazeera is banned from reporting inside the country. Sisi has arrived in New York ahead of the UN General Assembly, but is yet to comment on the protests. Charlotte Bellis reports.
From Cairo to Alexandria to Mansoura, anger and resentment filled Egypt's streets. People protested against President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, calling for him to resign following corruption allegations. In a rare sight, they flooded into Cairo's Tahrir Square before police dispersed the crowd, arresting some. The square was made famous in 2011 during the Egyptian revolution that toppled former President Hosni Mubarak.
The fact that tens of people...
Yeah, okay. Well, we all know about that, and guess what? That revolution was taken over, infiltrated, and I will post below to a video that is called "The Revolution Business. Does the USA sponsor revolutions?" Oh, it sure does. And it infiltrates them, and it turns the revolution around so that they can continue working in the country or overthrow or topple the government and institute their own government so that they're the puppet of it. Look, you know, everything has become so obvious now, so. But this is important to watch so that you understand also what is taking place.
Democracy has awoken in the Middle East, but was what seems like a spontaneous revolution actually a strategically planned event, cultivated by professional consultants?
The events in North Africa are orchestrated down to the finest details.
These revolution consultants are the worst nightmare of every regime. Here you can see the symbol of resistance.
And in a video that I was watching about the protests in Lebanon, I saw that fist. I didn't see it earlier. I see it now, operating. Ukraine protests taking place. And Catalonia, they want their independence from Spain. The people fight against the people who are protecting their government officials, their elitists in the country. That, well, they take orders from organizations like Council on Foreign Relations. That's not the only one. There's plenty of organizations and NGOs and United Nations. They're all working towards the New World Order. Yes. You create chaos, then you establish order. This is Greece, just a couple of weeks ago.
Well, protesters in Athens have...
Well, let me just show you. They're burning the American flag. And this was a protest to welcome Secretary of State Pompeo. Yeah, the people didn't get what they wanted, but there were major protests. And yes, the American flag is being burned. Now, you know, in Western countries, you know, Greece.
We want to shut down all the USA and NATO military bases, to come back all the soldiers, all the Greek soldiers from all over the world. We want to disengage our country from the US and EU and all the imperialist organizations.
Minor clashes erupted between protesters and police as demonstrators threw red paint on a statue of former U.S. President Harry Truman in the city center.
Why does Greece have a statue of President Truman? Yeah, I get it. I don't take offense. I get it. the United States the hell out of all of these countries, right? Peace, oh my God, peace would be established. We don't need the United Nations to establish peace. We need our governments, especially the UK, the US, Israel, Saudi Arabia, to stop all of the bombing that's taking place, all of the wars that continue to go on despite Trump saying he was going to stop those wars. No, Trump is absolutely part of it. So we've got chaos around the world, and nobody seems, oh, open our borders. People want to have a decent life, so they've got to come to the United States. When you don't even go, you don't know that millions upon millions upon millions, more and more every single day, Americans no longer have a decent life. Open those borders to allow people in to this country that we don't even know, haven't vetted properly. Allow them in. They want a decent life. Really? When we are the ones who are toppling Central American countries like Nicaragua and so many others, creating the conditions that make people want to leave to go to another country for a decent life. We shouldn't get to the root cause of all of these problems. Of course we should. Students in Athens are charging police over educational reforms. These people are fed up. The debt that people are experiencing is deliberate. It's orchestrated. Get them to be a debt slave. It's not just happening in the United States. It's happening all over. This is in Peru. And Guinea.
Gunfire in downtown Conakry. Frightened residents have locked themselves indoors, taking cover from Guinea's paramilitary forces who are shooting live rounds in the streets. What was supposed to be a nationwide protest against President Alpha Condé has turned into street battles between security forces and demonstrators. Armed with sticks and knives, they say they're here to defend their democracy.
Of course we are.
So they want their freedom, and paramilitary forces are controlling neighborhoods. Think of them as gang members. This is coming to the United States. When? Well, I'd have to be an insider to know, but it's coming. So please recognize that all agendas are operating on a speed that is like so head-spinning. It's overwhelming, and it's hard to put it all together in one little neat package, and boom, you then awaken everybody. No, it doesn't work like that. I now post just for you guys because the sleeping, well, those who have chosen willful ignorance, they will just bow down and obey their authority figure. That's what they'll do. Marched off into camps or whatever. Those who are awake, and this is not a video for those who are very knowledgeable about all of these agendas. I do have a lot of subscribers who are just kind of trying to put it all together. Okay, now I'm awake, but what the hell is going on? So it's for them primarily. I will not be linking to all of the videos on the protests happening. It's easy enough to find. Just put protest in the YouTube search bar, filter it out for today, and you will see countless countries going through just what you see right here. All right, guys. Stay safe. Get prepared. get yourself trained on how to use a gun. And this is coming from a former liberal Democrat. Former is the operative word there. Former. But I didn't jump over to the Republican side. Out of the matrix. Out completely. Because that matrix is what is enslaving everybody. We do not have two parties. We have one. And right now we are watching the divide and conquer, the dichotomy. Two sides going against each other. This is the Hegelian dialectic. This is what they do. They're working for the same institutions, bringing about the New World Order, but Pelosi and Trump, they fight one another. And Americans, well, they're enthralled with the drama. Big distraction. Doesn't matter. But think of what could happen. Trump doesn't get impeached. Couldn't you see violent protesting taking place all over the country? If Trump does or doesn't get impeached, doesn't matter. I could foresee violent protesting erupt all over the country. Ciao, guys.